It was my birthday, and I had spent the whole week preparing for a small dinner, something intimate and warm, the kind of night where family laughter fills the gaps that gifts never could. I had laid out the candles, set the table with my favorite dishes, and even baked my own cake because I wanted it to be perfect. The air smelled faintly of vanilla and roasted chicken, and for a moment I believed everything would fall into place. My phone buzzed on the counter, and when I picked it up, my heart sank. It was a message from my sister, sharp and careless, as if she had rehearsed it in her mind 100 times. "Don't wait up. Everyone's at my promotion party instead." For a second, I thought it was a mistake, a cruel joke, something she'd laugh about later when she finally walked through my door. But the silence in my apartment told me the truth before I could even put my phone down. I stood frozen in the kitchen, the smell of roasted chicken now making me nauseous, the cake I'd spent all afternoon icing suddenly looking ridiculous on. The counter. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the group chat with my family, desperate to find some kind of mix-up, some sign they were still on their way. Instead, my eyes landed on pictures, my parents smiling, my cousins holding glasses of champagne, my aunt hugging my sister under a banner that said, "Congratulations on your promotion." They were all there. Everyone. Except me. My birthday, the one day I had hoped might finally belong to me, had been hijacked by my sister's triumph. She hadn't even invited me, hadn't even bothered to say, "Come if you want." She'd simply told me not to wait up. That was her way of making sure I knew where I stood. In the shadows, at home, forgotten. My chest tightened as I thought about the countless times I'd stepped aside for her. When she got the bigger bedroom as kids, when I let her borrow my clothes and never saw them again, when I covered for her mistakes at work so our parents wouldn't scold her. She was the golden child, and I was the placeholder, the quiet one, the one who picked up the pieces. And now, even on the one day meant to celebrate my life, she had turned it into a celebration of herself. I sat down at the table I had so carefully set, the flicker of the candles mocking me with their cheer. My fork scraped against the plate as I forced down a bite of chicken, each chew bitter with betrayal. I kept imagining their laughter at her party, the clinking of glasses, the chorus of voices singing her praises. It wasn't just a party. It was proof that I had never really mattered to them the way she did. They hadn't even tried to hide it anymore. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't about one birthday. It was about years of being dismissed, sidelined, erased. This night was the breaking point, the moment everything snapped inside me. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the empty seats around the table, each one mocking me with a memory of who should have been sitting there. My father always took the head of the table, carving the meat with a sense of pride. My mother fussed over the side dishes, making sure everyone had enough. My cousins would fight over the softest piece of bread, and my aunt would retell stories no one asked for. All those traditions, all those rituals, and not a single person thought to show up for me. My phone buzzed again. Another picture from the party. My sister in a red dress, holding a microphone as everyone clapped. The caption read, "So proud of you." I felt something in me harden. For years, I'd convinced myself their favoritism was subtle, that if I just worked harder, loved louder, and sacrificed more, they would see me. But that text, on my birthday, wasn't subtle. It was a declaration. I was nothing compared to her. And maybe I had been blind. Maybe I wanted to believe the best of them, but the evidence was right in front of me now. My mind drifted to the past. Christmas mornings when my gifts were smaller, the way my parents introduced me as her sister, rather than by my name, the times they bragged endlessly about her achievements, but never once mentioned mine. I had been living in the shadows of her spotlight, and this birthday was the cruelest reminder of all. The thing is, betrayal doesn't just hurt, it clarifies. As I looked around at the uneaten food, the flickering candles, and the lonely cake, I realized I was done being their afterthought. My jaw tightened, and a calm washed over me that felt almost dangerous. This was no longer about one ruined birthday. This was about reclaiming every moment they had stolen from me. They had chosen her over me. Fine. But from that moment forward, I would choose myself. I blew out the candles one by one, not making a wish this time, because wishes were for people who still believed someone cared enough to listen. The smoke curled into the air, and I sat in the silence, my chest heavy, but my thoughts sharp, almost surgical. They had given me the gift of clarity tonight. My sister's text wasn't just careless, it was deliberate, a way of reminding me that she would always command the stage while I was left behind in the audience. But she had underestimated me. I wasn't the fragile girl she thought she could trample over without consequence. I opened my laptop, still lit by the dying glow of the candles, and pulled up my saved emails, the ones I'd tucked away for years, the ones that could unravel the perfect image of my sister my family adored. Late-night messages from her boss hinting at private meetings, expense reports that didn't add up, screenshots of gossip threads where her colleagues questioned her promotions. I hadn't collected them with malice at first. It was instinct, a way to prove to myself I wasn't crazy for noticing the cracks in her perfection. But now, on the night she had stolen from me, those files looked like ammunition. My phone buzzed again with another group picture. My parents' arms wrapped proudly around her, glasses raised in toast. My fingers curled tight around the screen. They thought this was her shining moment. They had no idea the ground beneath her was already starting to crumble. I whispered to myself, almost smiling, "Happy birthday," because for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally giving myself a gift, freedom from their approval and the power to decide what came next. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat cross-legged on the floor of my living room, the glow of my laptop screen painting my face in pale light as I sorted through every piece of evidence I had kept. At first, it had started like a habit. I'd save receipts, copy emails, and screenshot messages because deep down, I knew the pedestal my sister stood on wasn't as stable as she pretended. But now, looking at the folder I had built over the years, it felt less like scraps of suspicion and more like a loaded weapon I had been too scared to use. There was the hotel invoice from Chicago she'd sworn was a work trip, even though the dates lined up exactly with the weekend her. Boss's wife was out of town. There was the HR memo that had been quietly buried about her questionable expense reimbursements. And then there were the endless smug texts she'd sent me, flaunting her life as if mine was just a backdrop they had chosen to celebrate her that night. But what they didn't realize was how much of her success was built on lies, shortcuts, and people she stepped on to climb her way up. I remembered the way my parents used to look at me, always with a hint of disappointment, like I hadn't bloomed fast enough, bright enough, big enough. And yet, they never asked why I was the one who always stayed quiet, the one who picked up after her, the one who made sure the family didn't fall apart when her recklessness caused chaos. They praised her, but it was my silence that kept their image intact. That silence had cost me years, birthdays, memories, and sitting there on the floor, I realized I didn't owe it to them anymore. I drafted a single email, attaching a carefully chosen selection of files. Not all of them, just enough to plant doubt, to make the golden child's halo slip. My cursor hovered over the "to" line, and I typed slowly. Her boss, my parents, and 2 cousins who loved to gossip more than breathe. My finger lingered on the mouse, and my heart pounded. But the anger inside me steadied my hand. I clicked send. The whoosh of the email leaving felt like the first deep breath I'd taken in years. The candles on my cake had long gone out, but for the first time, I felt like the light in the room was mine. The next morning, my phone was buzzing before the sun even broke through the curtains. At first, I thought it was just the usual work notifications or some leftover chatter from her party. But when I saw the names lighting up my screen, my stomach tightened. My mother, my father. Then a string of unread messages from cousins who never bothered to check in with me unless there was gossip to share. I didn't open them right away. Instead, I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat by the window, and let the world come to me for once. The first call I answered was from my mother, her voice sharp with panic. "What did you do? Do you have any idea what you've caused?" I could almost picture her pacing the kitchen, clutching her phone with one hand and a rosary of excuses for my sister in the other. For years, I would have shrunk under that tone, apologized before I even knew what for. But not this time. "I told the truth," I said calmly, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. She sputtered something about family loyalty, about betrayal, about how I should have come to them privately. I let her rant until she hung up, because for once her disappointment didn't weigh me down. It rolled right off me. Then came the texts. Screenshots of the messages flying through the family chat. My aunt asking if the rumors were true, my cousin sending wide-eyed emojis, my father trying to shut everyone down with a single line. We don't discuss private matters publicly, but the damage was done. I knew my sister was scrambling, probably frantically calling her boss, spinning excuses, trying to patch holes in a ship that was already sinking. I imagined her face when she realized the same family who had worshipped her the night before was now dissecting her every move, whispering about the cracks in her perfect facade. For once, I wasn't the forgotten one. I was the one who had set the story in motion. And the best part, I hadn't even used everything I had. What I'd sent was just the beginning. The rest was still in my hands, and whether I used it or not was up to me, not her, not them, me. I took another sip of coffee and smiled to myself. Yesterday, they had celebrated her. Today, they couldn't stop talking about me. By the afternoon, the silence from my sister was louder than any argument we'd ever had. She hadn't texted, hadn't called, not even a passive-aggressive emoji in the family chat. That told me everything. She was cornered, calculating her next move, trying to decide whether to come at me with rage or with pleading. Meanwhile, the ripple effects were already spreading. A cousin sent me a screenshot of her boss's LinkedIn profile. It suddenly read, "Seeking new opportunities." Apparently, the company was in damage control mode after whispers about her promotion being less about merit and more about manipulation. The proud post my parents had made the night before, bragging about her success, had been quietly deleted, replaced by a generic holiday picture of the fireplace. They thought that would erase the embarrassment, but it only confirmed the truth. Their golden child's shine had dulled overnight. I walked into the kitchen and saw the remnants of my birthday dinner still on the table. Untouched plates, the half-cut cake sagging under the weight of neglect. Instead of sadness, I felt something different. Power. For once, I wasn't staring at evidence of what they had taken from me, but at proof of what I had taken back. They had ignored me on my birthday. Now, none of them could ignore me at all. I thought back to the years I had spent trying to earn their love, the late-night phone calls to comfort my sister when she was in trouble, the errands I ran for my parents without complaint, the way I had bitten my tongue every time they brushed me aside. All those sacrifices had bought me nothing but empty chairs and cold food on my birthday night. But the email I sent, the truth I unleashed, had bought me silence, respect, and fear. 3 things I had never been given freely. My phone buzzed. Again. And this time it was her. Just one line. "We need to talk." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. A month ago, I would have dropped everything to run to her, to fix whatever mess she'd gotten herself into. But now, I just let the phone sit there, buzzing against the counter until it went still. If she wanted to talk, she would do it on my terms, not hers. For once, I wasn't chasing her shadow. She was chasing mine. That evening, I finally stepped. Outside, the cold air biting my cheeks as if to remind me I was alive, awake. No longer the invisible sister who lived in the background of everyone else's story. I walked past houses glowing with holiday lights, couples carrying bags of gifts, children running ahead in scarves and mittens. To anyone else, it looked like an ordinary night. But for me, it felt like the start of a new life, one where I no longer begged for scraps of affection from people who had shown me time and again that I was disposable. My phone stayed in my pocket, buzzing now and then, but I didn't check it. I already knew who it was. My sister, desperate to spin this, to make herself the victim, maybe even to manipulate me into silence. But she couldn't undo what I had done. The truth had spread too far, too fast, and once people start seeing cracks, they can't unsee them. I thought about all the family gatherings to come, the way whispers would follow her into every room, the way my parents would hesitate before bragging about her again. That wasn't cruelty. It was balance. It was the scales finally leveling. After years of being tipped in her favor, I reached the park near my apartment and sat on a bench under a flickering streetlight, the frozen grass crunching beneath my boots. I pulled out my phone and opened her last message again. "We need to talk." This time, I typed back, slowly, deliberately, "No. You need to listen." Then I locked my screen and slipped it back into my coat pocket. The words felt heavier than any argument, stronger than any proof I had sent. It was my line in the sand, my declaration that things would never return to the way they were. For the first time, I didn't feel like the forgotten one, the shadow, the placeholder. I felt like the author of my own story. And as the night wrapped around me, quiet and cold, I smiled to myself. Because my sister had taken my birthday, but I had taken back my life. Days passed, and the fallout only grew heavier. By the end of the week, my parents had stopped calling entirely, choosing silence over confrontation, which was unlike them. My aunt reached out once, awkwardly trying to smooth things over with a half-hearted, "family should stick together," but I could hear the nervous edge in her voice, as if she too was afraid of being caught in the crossfire. The family chat, once buzzing with daily updates and praise for my sister, had gone eerily quiet except for the occasional forwarded holiday meme, as if pretending normalcy could erase the tension. But nothing could erase it. I went to the grocery store one evening and ran into one of my sister's old friends. She gave me a long, knowing look before saying, "I heard about everything. Guess she wasn't as untouchable as she thought." It wasn't spiteful. It was matter of fact. The kind of statement people say when they've been waiting years for someone's mask to slip. That was when I realized just how fragile my sister's empire had been, propped up by other people's silence, including mine. And now that silence was gone. The irony was that in destroying me on my birthday, she had actually freed me from chasing their approval, freed me from the endless competition I never asked for, freed me from believing that my worth depended on their recognition. My apartment was still quiet, but it no longer felt like loneliness. It felt like peace. I cooked smaller meals for myself, lit candles without waiting for anyone to arrive, and cut myself a slice of cake whenever I felt like celebrating, no calendar required. I even started laughing at how different my life looked in just a week. They had chosen her party over me, but now she was the one left standing in a crowd that had already started to drift away. I didn't need to gloat, didn't need to send another email or push harder. The truth was doing the work for me. One night, as I scrolled through old photos, I landed on a childhood picture, me and my sister side by side at my 7th birthday. She was grinning, holding the biggest piece of cake, while I was half smiling with a smaller slice. Looking at it now, the symbolism was almost too obvious, but instead of bitterness, I felt something else. Closure. I closed the album, set it aside, and whispered into the quiet room, "Never again." This time, it wasn't a plea. It was a promise. The storm reached its peak about 2 weeks later when my sister finally showed up at my door. It was late, nearly midnight, and I almost didn't answer. But the pounding on the wood was relentless, like she thought she could force her way into my life just as easily as she had always stolen my moments. When I opened it, she stood there disheveled, eyes rimmed red, her perfect image cracked. For years I had watched her walk into rooms with her head high, commanding attention, basking in the glow of everyone's admiration. But now she looked small, almost childlike, like someone who had been stripped of her armor. She pushed past me without asking, pacing in my living room, words spilling out in a rush. Accusations, excuses, tears. She said I had ruined her career, that our parents weren't speaking to her, that whispers followed her everywhere she went. She begged me to retract what I'd sent, to tell people it was just a misunderstanding, a moment of jealousy on my part. I let her rant until her voice cracked, until she collapsed on my couch, clutching her head in her hands. A month ago, I would have felt pity. A year ago, I might have even apologized to her. But sitting across from her now, I realized I didn't feel sorry anymore. I felt calm, steady, almost detached, like I was finally seeing her for who she really was. Not a star I could never outshine, but a woman who had built her life on smoke and mirrors, terrified of the moment the curtain might fall. I told her the truth, my voice low but firm. "You took my birthday. You took every chance I ever had to be seen. And you thought there would never be consequences. But you were wrong." She tried to interrupt, but I raised a hand, and for the first time in my life, she actually stopped talking. "This isn't about revenge," I continued. "It's about balance. For years, I carried your secrets. I cleaned up your messes. I kept my mouth shut while our family turned me invisible so they could worship you. I'm done with that. I won't take back what I've said because it was the truth. And if the truth ruins you, that's not my fault. That's yours. The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. She stared at me wide-eyed, as if she couldn't recognize the sister she thought she had beaten down into submission. And maybe she couldn't, because that version of me no longer existed. When she finally left, slamming the door behind her, I didn't feel shaken or guilty. I felt free. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat by the window, and watched the snow fall under the streetlight. For once, I didn't wonder what they were saying about me, didn't ache for an invitation to belong. I belonged to myself now, and though my sister's world was unraveling, mine was just beginning to take shape. The final crack in their illusion came on New Year's Eve. While the rest of the world counted down to midnight, I sat alone in my apartment with a single candle lit on the table, watching the soft flame dance as if it were marking the passage of more than just time. I hadn't heard from my parents in days, and I knew why. They were busy trying to salvage what was left of my sister's reputation, busy spinning excuses, busy pretending that their golden child hadn't fallen. For once, I didn't feel the sting of being left out. Instead, I felt the quiet power of choosing not to be part of the charade. A notification lit up my phone, an invitation to a family gathering, hastily arranged to clear the air. I stared at it for a long moment before pressing delete. They didn't want me there because they valued me. They wanted me there to play my old role, the silent one, the one who nodded and forgave so their lives could move on uninterrupted. That version of me was gone. Midnight came and went, fireworks exploding in the distance, but I didn't feel alone. I felt whole, like the air around me was lighter because I had finally stopped carrying the weight of their approval on my back. I thought about my sister, how she had stolen my birthday and turned it into her own stage, and I thought about how, in doing so, she had given me the greatest gift she never intended, the chance to finally break free. My life wasn't going to be measured by whether they clapped for me or whether I fit neatly into the space they had carved out. My life would be mine to build, mine to celebrate, mine to protect. I raised my glass to the quiet room, to the flickering candle, to the reflection of myself in the darkened window. "Happy birthday," I whispered again, this time not as a mockery but as a vow, because the truth was, it was my birthday. Not the one marked by calendars or stolen by my sister, but the one where I was reborn into my own strength. And as the night stretched on, I knew that no matter how many stories my family tried to tell, mine was finally the only one that mattered.